Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to our second edition of Breaking News for this Tuesday. It's the 25th day of June, 2024. And we're going to look at three stories during this edition. Number one, Hamas continues to reject the hostage deal. They made it clear again today about that. We now have some further information on what's going on in Rafah. And Gallant, the Defense Secretary of Israel, who is in the United States, tells the Secretary of Defense Austin that the time is now to stop Iran's nuclear program. Three very important stories. All right, let's get to the headlines. Number one, Hamas stands firm against global pressure to accept the hostage deal. This is from the Jerusalem Post, and this should not come as a shock to anyone. Hamas has reiterated its call for a full ceasefire, while Defense Minister Yoav Gallant met with U.S. officials, including counterpart Lloyd Austin, to discuss phases of the war. Hamas stood firm Tuesday against global pressure that it accept the proposed three-phase deal, stressing that any deal which did not guarantee a permanent ceasefire from the start was not an agreement. The Qatar-based Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh released a statement after his sister was killed during an IDF strike in Gaza, accusing Israel deliberately targeting her to pressure the group to take the deal. If Israel thinks targeting my family will change our position or that of the resistance, they are delusional, he said. He spoke out as Qatar and Egypt continue their efforts to close the deal. Debate continued in Israel around the three-phase plan that U.S. President Joe Biden first unveiled on May 31st. U.S. State Department spokesman Matthew Miller told reporters in Washington that Hamas had sent a written response to the deal several weeks ago, which of course we know. That response rejected the proposal that had been put forward by Israel, which President Biden had outlined. Miller recalled that the United Nations Security Council approved the proposal. The deal would have delayed the issue of a permanent ceasefire, which is a sticking point between Israel and Hamas, to the second phase. It offered a first phase during which talks over a permanent ceasefire would continue, while some 33 of the hostages would be freed in exchange for an immediate lull of the war. The absence of the deal was one of the topics on Defense Minister Yoav Gallant's agenda during the conversations he held in Washington during his visit this week, including with his American counterpart Lloyd Austin at the Pentagon on Tuesday. Austin called on Hamas to accept the deal. The onus is on Hamas to accept this roadmap to a durable end to the war, he said. The failure of Hamas to accept this important proposal is prolonging the agony of the Palestinian civilians and Israeli civilians. Austin, other officials called for Israel to engage in mediation to return the hostages. The only way to bring them, that is the hostages, all home, in principle, is diplomacy. We must not miss this moment, and we must not risk indefinite war or insurgency, he said. Now, this statement by Austin is ridiculous. Hamas will not budge. They will never budge. They're a terrorist organization, and they hold the cards. As long as they're holding the hostages, they can say or do whatever they do. But also, we're going to find out with our next headline, they're basically finished in Rafa and basically finished in Gaza. But it won't matter. They can hide the hostages wherever they might be, even though they're not ruling in Gaza, even though their military has been basically obliterated. So let's look at the second story. Headline 2. Half of Hamas in Rafah is beaten. The IDF will gain full control in 2 weeks. This is the headline. The IDF also revealed, this is kind of building on what we talked about earlier today about how the general there, Halev, said, he congratulated the troops for getting the job done. Well, this gives quite a few more details than we had this morning. So we're going to go with these. The IDF also revealed that the houses and tunnels in Rafah had new kinds of defenses and booby traps, with some houses having video surveillance in each room that gave the house to facilitate ambushes. The IDF on Monday said that its Division 162 had defeated half of Hamas's battalions in Rafah, including killing at least 550 terrorists, as well as destroying about 200 tunnel shafts, and eliminated the terror group's last major rocket inventory. Further, the IDF said that within a couple of weeks, it would likely be in control of all of Rafah, and that the final battles with the remaining 2 Hamas battalions in parts of Tel al-Sultan and the eastern part of Shabura are already underway. In addition, the IDF said that the tunnel network in Rafah, especially near the Philadelphia corridor with Egypt, has been found to be even more complex than those found in Han Yunis, Jabalia, and the military quartet of Gaza City. Currently, the IDF says Division 162, commanded by Brigadier General Itzhak Cohen, has already achieved operational control over 60 to 70% of all of Rafah, with its 1.4 million or so civilians having long fled to al-Muwasi on the coast, central Gaza, and Khan Yunis. Now, there are still some terrorists fighting and some are in hiding, waiting for some later point to carry out guerrilla warfare style attacks. In other words, when they're defeated, there'll still be Hamas soldiers there. They will conduct the guerrilla warfare attacks. But the real difficult fighting, the intense fighting, for all intents and purposes, should be over in a couple of weeks. All right. So it goes on to say, to date, the IDF has identified 25 large tunnels, which at the very least go up to the border with Egypt. Now, this is interesting. Strangely, the IDF, while implying that it was likely that many of them went into Egypt, they would not yet confirm a single one crossing the border. It was unclear if the hesitancy to confirm was purely a question of inspections and time, or if the politics of avoiding embarrassing the Egyptians was part of the calculation, which is, of course, more likely. Why would the Egyptians allow all these tunnels going from Gaza from Rafah into Egypt if they knew anything about it? Aren't they supposed to be on the side of the Palestinian civilians? Aren't they supposed to be on the side of, not on the side of Hamas and the terrorists anyway? All right, with Egyptian approval. Now, here's where it gets real interesting, because we were wondering about this. We talked about this the other day. With Egyptian approval, the IDF is hoping to build some underground obstacles and sensors on the Philadelphia corridor to prevent the further redigging of cross-border smuggling tunnels. Now, we mentioned the fact that Israel, before they leave Gaza, they have to secure those tunnels on the border, that Philadelphia corridor, that 8-mile-long stretch that goes into Egypt, where there cannot be, all the tunnels need to be destroyed, and they have to do something where there won't be tunnels rebuilt there. So what it seems is going to happen, this is the first time I've heard this, they're going to build some underground obstacles and sensors in this corridor to prevent the future redigging of cross-border smuggling tunnels. The cross-border smuggling tunnels have been key to Hamas's armament capabilities, including receiving weapons from Iran. The IDF also said that houses and tunnels in Rafah had new kinds of defenses and booby traps, with some houses having video surveillance in each room of the given house to facilitate ambushes. You know why they're able to do that? Because the operation here in Rafah has been put off for about 3 months because Joe Biden dragging slowly and telling Israel must do this, must do that, where Hamas has had time to perfect their ambushes, to perfect the places that are there in Rafah to kill the maximum number of Israelis. Like exactly why they see these things here for the first time. Amid international opposition, the IDF took the Palestinian side of the Rafah crossing on May 7th, attaining full operational control of the crossing. The military has since been engaged in operations in the area. Israel has maintained the importance of operating in Rafah to eliminate the last 4 Hamas battalions, which it believed were still in the region. Once this is done, then the intense fighting in Gaza will basically be over. Of course, it'll take some time to mop up. And again, Israel eventually will have to leave Gaza. They cannot stay there as an occupying army. They cannot stay on the border as much as they'd like to, but they have to put the situation to the place where none of this will happen again. Remember the 3 things: destroy the army, the military capability of Hamas, to make sure they will never rule again there in Gaza. And number 3, make sure this never happens again in Gaza with anybody sneaking things in tunnels and building up munitions to attack Israel at some time in the future. In fact, Netanyahu offered a 4th thing, and that is make sure Iran can't bother Israel anymore either, particularly through its surrogates. All right, so what we got here is we don't understand why Lloyd Austin would say diplomacy is the answer. And in a couple of weeks, there won't be any Hamas army really basically to fight there. There'll be guerrilla warfare, obviously, but the main fighting is going to move to Lebanon, as we've talked about. So they need to find, where these hostages are. They need to check every meter, every yard, every inch, every centimeter there in Gaza to try and find where the hostages are, assuming they are still there and not been scurried away somewhere into Egypt. So that's where we're at on that. So it's very strange that the U.S. would say diplomacy is the answer. Diplomacy is the answer. No, they've gotten this far. They're doing what they wanted to do, keeping Hamas from having this military might that will come and strike Israel again like it did on October 7th. All right, our 3rd headline. Now, this is Gallant talking to Austin, the Defense Secretary of the U.S. This is the moment for the U.S. to prevent a nuclear Iran. Now, this is what's also crucial. Not only you have as we've said, these 7 different areas which Israel's at war with, and one of them is Iran, and Iran preparing a nuclear weapon, in the process of enriching uranium to the place where they can have a weapon, have a nuclear warhead. They've got the delivery systems there in place, it seems. And so Gallant was Austin told Gallant, then, we stand together to ensure that Iran, which is the source of so much of the region's violence and instability, could never achieve a nuclear weapon. All right, that's what he said. But, the USA aren't doing a whole lot about this, are they? They didn't even join with the European nations in the last condemnation before the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Commission, which said that Iran is violating all the rules that are there, that are set in place. They've got too much, uranium there. They're enriching it to the weapons grade against all the agreements that have been made in the past. And the US didn't want to even say anything. Now, Israel's got to do something sooner than later, because the first bomb that Iran does, if they do make, is going to go to Israel, the second one to the US. And so Israel must do something. And again, the US is full of empty promises here. So this is the time to fulfill the promises. Gallant said Iran now constitutes a danger to the entire world. The defense ministers said that regarding preventing a nuclear Iran, time is running out. And that's what we've been emphasizing here. Time is indeed running out. So, even though Austin told Gallant, we stand together to ensure that Iran, which is the source of so much of the region's violence and instability, can never achieve a nuclear weapon. And my comment was, well, the US is not acting like this is the case. While saying they don't want a regional war by letting Iran off the hook, they're actually preparing the region for it. As so many nations have mentioned, the U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East is schizophrenic and confusing. We don't know where they're at from one day to the next. Remember yesterday, the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, this general told Israel, well, we really can't help you if you're in a war with Hezbollah. You're on your own. We can't really do anything, which of course they could. There's many things they could do, but it seems they won't do, because they keep saying, well, diplomacy is the answer. Diplomacy is the answer. There's not going to be any diplomacy, because you're dealing with Iran. They're behind Hezbollah. They're behind Hamas. They don't want any peace. They would sacrifice all these people, like we mentioned a few days ago in one of the programs we did a number of years ago. There was a quote from one of the Iran Ayatollahs, I believe it was, that said, if we have to sacrifice 18 million of our own people to destroy the great Satan, the US, and the little Satan, Israel, will do it. And so they could care less about the Palestinians. They could care less about the Lebanese people. All right. So what we do know will eventually happen, the Bible does tell us. So we want you to see our books, 12 books on Bible prophecy on our website, Educating Our World, including 25 signs. We are near the end. Now, they're all free. We're not selling anything. We don't sell anything here. They're all free downloads. Take advantage of it. 25 signs. We're near the end. And again, we emphasize the situation in the Middle East right now has nothing to do with the predicted Ezekiel 38-39 invasion. And please see Appendix 4 of our book, 25 Signs. We're near the end, for many reasons as to why this is the case. We title it, what about Iran's April 13, 14 attack upon Israel? Could that be the beginning of Ezekiel 38 and 39? And the answer is a loud no. All right, well, we'll be with you tomorrow morning, Lord willing, with some of the latest updates, see what's gone on from here. Never a dull moment, is there? Good news is Jesus Christ is coming back. He is in control of all things. And so let's not be discouraged or disillusioned by the things that we see. I'm Don Stewart. Thanks for watching. Until next time, may the Lord, as always, richly, richly bless.